and they came out to Iwo Jima with us and was helping us with the recovery efforts. So we would take them out every day, hoist them down to the mountain. They would rappel down, get what they could, put it in body bags, hoist it back up to the aircraft.
Welcome to the Calm in the Chaos podcast, where we discuss untold heroic experiences and dive into the mindset of the Navy's elite rescue swimmers. Hosted by former U.S. Navy Aviation Rescue Swimmer, Mount Everest solo summiteer, and best-selling author Brian Dickinson.
All right, got super special guest today, Erica Gibson, almost 24 years, like a month away of service as a U.S. Navy Aviation Rescue Swimmer, multiple deployments, just tons of experiences. And you're still active, so it's so cool because I'm interviewing people that, have been out for 40 some years to people that are in, and it's so cool to just get the different experiences and the changes along the way. So thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Brian. It's a pleasure.
So for those that don't know you, please tell us about yourself. Like, where'd you grow up?
I grew up in the very small town of Florence, Arizona. It's pretty much a one-stop light town where Sheriff Joe Arpaio was. And if you ever remembered back in the day when they had inmates wearing pink jumpsuits, that was his, territory. So big, largest prison facility and immigration facility there. Very small town that I grew up in. I am one of 7 children.
Oh, wow.
Mostly girls. And
where do you fit in that?
I am the second oldest.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I got pretty young. It was like 3 girls, a boy, and then 3 more girls.
Wow.
Sandwiched
in there, man.
Definitely.
Was that tough for your brother?
It was. Yeah, it was definitely tough for him, and we picked on him a lot, but he's doing good. So growing up in that small town, it was there's nothing really to do there other than swim, be on the swim team. It would get hot in Arizona during the summers, and that's kind of like what took my interest in eventually becoming a rescue swimmer. So, but I was a lifeguard, then during the summers. Went to high school there. I did get like a 2-year scholarship to a junior college for academics, but that lasted about a month, after leaving high school, just because, again, it was a small town, and I was like, there's got to be more to this world. I got to get out and explore. And I did have an awesome Navy recruiter that came into the high school at the time when you're doing your testing, and asked if what I like to do, and I said I like to swim. That's like one thing. And he's like, "Do you want to jump out of helicopters and swim?" And I was like, "That's a thing?" And he's like, "Yes." And I was like, "That sounds like a great idea." And he warned me, he said, he says, a voluntary program, you don't make it through, you're going to be chipping paint off the side of the ship. And
nice.
I still didn't know. Right. Yeah. I still didn't know what that meant. Like not even being in the Navy yet, but obviously today that was my motivation for never quitting and sticking with it. But
awesome.
Yeah.
Now, small town, like what's the population of Florence?
Oh, goodness. It's increased a lot over the years with more facilities built there. And
but when you were there?
Oh, gosh. I can't give you the exact number off the top of my head, but I can tell you that my senior class, graduating class, it was less than 70 folks that year.
Same. Mine was 69.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, I was in Southern Oregon. So yeah, same scenario. Yeah, I had opportunities to go to college, soccer and art scholarship opportunities. And same, it's like, I don't know, maybe same for you, but you come from a small town and the last thing you want to do is just, continue going to school, maybe at some point in your life. I went back and got my master's later, but I want to see the world and just have some adventure and get some experiences beyond like that small town, because probably, I'm guessing your small town was like mine. You could see the cycle continue of people that get stuck there. Right. And, early pregnancies and that type of thing, get married early. And I mean, that's fine for some people. It just wasn't fine for me, and obviously yourself.
Yes. And if for anyone that's ever lived in Arizona or grew up there, teenage pregnancy and drugs were like the top. That was it. And like you said, not everybody, a lot of people are very successful and, have successful marriages and stuff growing in that small town environment. But it was, and I had a lot of mentorship too in the places that I worked. I had a retired Air Force pilot that was just like, be an air crewman, go fly for the Air Force, go fly in the Air Force. And I didn't know a lot about the Air Force. And again, thankfully, my, BM1 recruiter at the time, his advertisement or selling of being a Navy rescue swimmer stuck with me more than anything. So
nice. Yeah. That's really cool. Yeah. So what year was that?
That was 2001.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's wild. So when I went and saw my recruiter, it was 92, and I ended up going in February of 93 just because I had to wait for the opening for Air Crew Rescue Swimmer. But the recruiter brought me in, sat me down in front of a TV, put a VCR tape in, VHS tape, and it was the Cher. Where she's the singer Cher. Is it If You Could Turn Back Time, I think was the song.
Yeah, that's fun.
But she's dancing around on like a battleship in like just floss. She's wearing like nothing, and all the guys are just cheering. And it was the most awkward thing. Like that would never happen today. But it was like that was the recruiting thing. If anything, that pushed me away because it was just like, this is cheesy for one. And like, do I look like I'm desperate and this is what's going to like push me over the edge? It's just the weirdest time. I've heard other people, it's like around that same time, like that was their marketing material. And apparently that was approved at the time. I don't know. It's weird. I may edit this out, but it was just like, it's just different times.
Can you imagine seeing that? Oh my goodness. Yeah. Like I didn't see any videos or anything. It was just, by word of what it was like and what was required of the job. And of course, they never said anything about being a sensor operator or hunting submarines.
Yeah,
or
like
being
the
a
majority
gunner.
of your job will be
Right.
this.
Yes. It's like glorified rescue swimmer and you're going to save people. And I was like, well, that's what I kind of do I was a swimming pool lifeguard and, I did get a couple of good, quick pulls out of the baby pool, but, at the time, when parents aren't paying attention, but yeah, so
you went to Great Lakes, and then did you have Dive Motivator back then?
We did. Yeah, they did. They still had Dive Motivator back then, and I wasn't in it too long. I think they just kind of wanted to test the waters to see like where you sat, and I was a pretty good swimmer at the time, and so didn't have to worry about that much. I think I went for like maybe a week, and they were like, she doesn't need to go. She's good.
Nice. Yeah. When I went through in 93 in Orlando, I mean, it was divers, SEALs, SWIC, swimmers, EOD candidates, people that were wanting to go that route, and you had to test out of it. But, we'd be swimming with bricks over our head and stuff like at 4 a.m. And it was awesome because even if I didn't have to go, I would have, because we got out of all the lame boot campy stuff. So we'd be over like, they would just leave us alone, like the company commanders or whatever they're called. And then, so that was kind of fun, other than having to wake up at, 3 a.m. So it got less sleep. But after a while, we kind of figured out the system, and some of us would just go and hide and sleep underneath the bleachers somewhere and getting through. But yeah, it's funny. Like all the training you go through, you realize that at the time, like it's so, it feels like so intense just because there's so much pressure to succeed or the fear of failure. But when you look back on it, it's like the coolest stuff to get paid to do.
Oh, it is. I would love to. I say that right now, but I have to go back through rescue swimmer refresher school in June. So I say that now, like, oh, it would be fun. It's definitely fun. When there's not so much, there is a lot of pressure on you, which is really good, right? Because you have to be like in that stressful environment. But I think over time too, and as you get older, like that pressure is just a little bit more intimidating. And and it does get harder over time. But also like when you get done, it's awesome because you'll accomplish something and you say, man, I could have done so much better at that. Or if I just given a little bit more effort in this area, or something like that. So, but yeah, so our school, going down to Pensacola next after Great Lakes was the first time I had actually been tested in the Navy. Because, before, like, our dive motivator was different. It was more just like swimming proficiency at boot camp than anything. But, obviously going to air crew school first and then STAR school right after that.
Okay, that's changed now. It's like flipped.
Yeah, right. Yeah, now they've flipped it because of the attrition rates. But it was that was definitely challenging because it's like, cool, you can swim, but all right, now can you do all of the calisthenics? Can you do the push-ups? Can you do the pull-ups? Can you run a mile and a half in under 12 minutes? That used to be the thing back then. It's not anymore. But like the swim was never an issue. But also, if you're a good swimmer, if you've never swam with fins before, that's also a contributor to like how successful or unsuccessful you can be. Because I had never swam. I was a much better swimmer without fins than I was with fins. And initially they gave me the rockets, which are a little bit sturdier. And I could barely even swim with those. I could barely kick my legs. And so they gave me the turtles. And they got it's a flimsier flap on the fin. But and then I started moving more. So
yeah, it's totally tough. Like they say, like, even in Navy SEALs training, like they almost don't want you to be dive certified. Like they recommend that because you're going to learn everything the wrong way.
right.
So we will teach you the Navy way or whatever. And yeah, it's true. You can be super proficient as a swimmer, but then when you put all that gear on, everything else, it kind of changes the playing field a little bit. So it's interesting. I had Melissa Dixon, as who on yesterday, and she was talking about how you share all the equipment in SAR school, and none of it fit her. Like like her mask just was too big. They had to so that was rough for her. I'd never even considered that. I forgot that we even shared gear, but from the attrition rate, it makes sense. Do you remember any issues with any of the shared gear?
Oh man, I think they might have acquired more gear at that point because we had at least 8 to 10 females that were there at the schoolhouse at the same time.
Oh, cool.
So it wasn't that much of an issue, which was really nice. I know that the guys definitely had more issues with that because everybody, like, tall, short, stocky, whatever it was. Most of us females had similar physiques, I want to say. Back then there might have been a few that were just shorter than the rest, but for the most part, no major issues.
No, okay.
Yeah,
this is the first I heard of it as well, so just curious. So overall, how was the experience?
Man, I have never been so proud of myself, like, for going through something like that. I look back on my entire career and I can say that I'm, very happy with where I'm at and what I've gone through throughout the years. But it was the best experience. I hate to bring up, past childhood trauma, but it was an environment. It was an environment that wasn't that great. A lot of, verbal, physical abuse, things like that. And to have structure, and it didn't even bother me that somebody was yelling at me. Like, I didn't want to be a disappointment or failure, period, because, you didn't want to be a part of that. And you were already too much in it to look back the other way. It was a huge accomplishment to get through something like that. And I looked, even though these people were yelling at us, even when you go through SEER school and you get beat a little bit, you look back at those individuals that did it to you, and that is a hard task for them to put on a face and a persona every day to put you through the stressors just to make you a stronger and more capable individual. Like they literally pull the weaknesses out of you and make you stronger. And I'm so humble and appreciative for that.
Yeah, no, that's well said. In writing the book Calm in the Chaos, I had to do a lot of research, took like 3 years. I mean, I had to pause at one point. I mean, I was not only heading down that, uncovering hidden trauma in myself, but in others, and it was kind of this therapeutic thing. But it's interesting, and I don't know if there's been studies or not, but just the people that get into our situations, like in a special ops environment, first responders, um, it's something called chasing trauma, and a lot of us, a big majority of us, have had childhood trauma, and we had no control at that
Right.
state. Now we get into these positions where we are chasing that trauma unconsciously, but in a way to take control of it, to change the outcome.
Mhm.
You're jumping from a helicopter where it's a traumatic, every helicopter ride is a traumatic event, but now you're hovering at 15 feet or 10 and 10, and you're jumping, and it could be anything in the water, and those people are in shock. They might be missing their head. There might, there's so many things there, but you're doing it and you're not even questioning it. You're in charge, and it's like, what drives someone like you? And I don't know, the common thread is kind of that chasing trauma, and the just trying to change the outcome of what we had no control over as children. So it's pretty heavy.
Right. Yeah, it is. There was a big part of like enlisting into the Navy to get away from that environment and also like not to get stuck in the bubble. But um, it was, and I had no idea that there were people out there who didn't know you but could care so much about you,
Mm.
and just only even knowing you like for a month going through a schoolhouse, right? They already care about you so much in your career, and that's just kind of like what we're trying to do is look after each other and take care of one another, and like you said, like it could possibly be that trauma bonding, and essentially we're all going through the trauma together too, and that's what brings us all together is like, hey, like we all went through these experiences in training and life, and we got through it together, and we can't really say that we could have done it without anybody, for that matter. Like no person can do it alone. Um, and just having that guidance and that mentorship and that structure really, really made an impact on my life during
Yeah,
that time.
yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah.
It's amazing. That's, the military is not for everybody, but it's definitely for a lot of people, and it's just life changing. And I think we were talking yesterday, like the camaraderie side of it. It's like it's unmatched, and it's unmatched. I think in the military, it's whatever specific org. Like some are generalized, and you can just kind of connect outside of the military with if you're a veteran. But there's special groups like ours where it's a lot of people just don't, they just can't understand, and when I like that trauma bonding, like when we're all together and we're all trying to survive like some of the toughest training that you can have, and it's everything from every type of almost every type of abuse you could have, from like
Oh
physical,
yeah.
emotional, mental, but you're all getting through it together, and it's for a positive purpose. It's
Mhm.
not because, well, we could go down that path. Sometimes people haven't dealt with their trauma and then they're in a position of power. But for the most part, they see the potential. They
Mhm.
are trying to shape us in a way that they know that we can do this job. If not, I mean, you usually know in a job interview in the first 15 minutes whether this person's going to make it or not. But if there's that glimpse of potential, I think just from a rewarding and fulfilling perspective as an instructor, and I've talked to plenty of them. It's when these people, these candidates come through and they have such low confidence because of the beatdown that they had growing up, and they are able to see the potential, pivot that in a positive manner, and get them to that proudest day of their life when they're graduating, when they're doing their first jump and everything else. So yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah, it was so bad that I had instructors that would, try to like ease, because I wasn't a very open person, and they would try to like joke around with me to ease, like the environment. And I remember, you would have responsibilities such as like summer school, like if you're on the watch bill to like clean the building after your school day, and I remember I had this vacuum, and I won't name the instructors. They're pretty funny. But I knocked on the door and they said enter, and I brought in the vacuum, and they're like, "What are you doing?" And I said, I'm here to vacuum, petty officer. And they're like, "Leave the vacuum and get out." And I was like, "Excuse me?" And they're like, "Leave the vacuum and get out." And I'm like, "Okay." They're like, go outside." And so I'm like, and then I leave, gullible person. I leave the room, I go outside, and I'm standing outside of the door, and I'm like, what just happened? Like, what did I do wrong? Like, I had no idea that they were messing with me. Like, again, that's just me being gullible. And eventually one of them comes outside and they're yelling at me. They're like, "Airman Ward, what are you doing outside here?" And I was like, "Well, you told me to come outside." And he's like, "Really?" And I was like, "Yes." And he's like, "Where's your vacuum?" And I was like, "I don't know what happened to it." And they hid it in the room. And so eventually, like, they made me come inside, and they had me find the vacuum. I found the vacuum, and then they're like, "Grab your vacuum, hold on to it." I'm like, "Okay." And they're like, "Repeat after me." And I was like, "All right." And they're like, "This is my vacuum, and there are many others like it. This one is mine." And I had no idea it was in reference to the movie, right? Full Metal Jacket.
Full Metal Jacket, yep.
Gullible Erica. So, and it was just, they could tell. And that's how I knew that they cared. When you think back on those times, like going through training and stuff, is that, people were still trying to like get to know you, get to know your personality. And, they really cared about you as a person. And unfortunately, if you didn't make it, that was it. But at the end of the day, like, they really did, even though it was hard and the pressure was hard, they really cared about our success, so.
Yeah. So the attrition rate is, it's really high through rescue swimmer school. It's one of the toughest. I know someone said it was like the second toughest other than SEAL training, but I think every training is tough if you're going through it. So I don't like to get in the comparative game.
Right.
But underwater, people don't work well in water in general. You really realize that once you become a rescue swimmer, like, because you just take everything pretty lightly, and because you're very confident in the water. But with such a high attrition rate, what is different about you? Like, why? Like, I know you were a strong swimmer, but when you put fins on, it's a different game and all that stuff. But there's a lot of tough techniques you got to go through. There's a lot of knowledge of the different aircraft and harnesses, life-saving. It's all over the map, and people fail out for many different reasons. So what do you think was different about you?
Oh man. If you think about it, I really had nothing else to go back to, and nothing to show for. Like, I was, fresh out of high school, and the people that were the guiding lights in my life were the ones that, made the most sense when they spoke to me, like my grandparents, who are, both deceased now, and a few other folks along the way. But I just, that's a hard one, because it's like comparing apples to oranges when everybody talks about their different experiences and how they made it through. I just knew
we can never compare to the person left or right of us, right? Because this is your story.
Right.
And
absolutely.
I think you did answer it in that there was no plan B.
Yeah, there was no, that's horrible saying these days, because we know what a plan B is now, but
okay,
I'm kidding if I edit that part out.
Wow. Okay, so we're going there.
We're going to edit that part out.
Don't worry, after Melissa's, I have to change it to explicit anyways. So
okay.
we can talk about anything now.
Yeah, so no plan. and I just couldn't quit. I just, every time, they talked about people quitting or DOR, you heard like the horror stories or, what was going on with people's lives after they did quit. I was just like, I'm not going to be one of those individuals. Like I refuse to. And still to this day, I've been knocked down a few times. I've fell flat on the ground. Um, and I felt like I couldn't come back up, but I did. And it was just refusing to quit.
Yeah. It's a good trait. Within reason, I guess. There's
Yeah.
sometimes it's okay. Like you just have to know that and having that self-awareness, which clearly you do. A lot of people they just quit so early. I always think about like some of the people that went through SARS school and that seemed very, there's some that clearly weren't going to make it, right? So they're going to weed out pretty easy. And then they have successful careers outside of that. And I'm guessing they probably knew going into it, I'm going to try this, but there's probably, 0% that I'm going to make it. Then there's the others that, I don't know, they failed multis or life saving or something, and a couple times they get rolled and then they're out. And I don't know, the instructor sees something that we clearly don't when we're eye level with them, shoulder to shoulder. But I always wonder, like, what was that experience for them, and were they able to turn that around? Because like any traumatic experience or negative experience, failure, if you camp in it, it's really dangerous. But if you can
It
use
is.
it, use those failures to either come back and try again, or just to, I don't know, excel in a different field or whatever you're doing, just channel that all that knowledge that you learned. And it's easy to get in a downward spiral, and that's, I don't know, that's a dangerous area to go. But yeah, I always hope that people are better no matter what when they come out of that school.
Absolutely. And it's, I had a girlfriend, she was in SAR school with me. She was actually like my roommate and a really good friend. And she did not make it through SAR school, and it was the run, specifically. So even though she was a phenomenal swimmer, like at the time, those were the requirements that you had to do your mile and a half under 12 minutes. And that was one thing that she wasn't very good at. But they did work with her, which was something that I learned early on in my career, which helped me, take care of sailors in the future, especially when you have your own dropout, or say, hey, I don't want to do this anymore. Was that they really took care of in the sense, like, what do you want to do? Like, what can I help you with? How can I help you transition? And so I'm glad at that time I had seen that, because that's not always the case, and that's in any service. We've always heard the horror stories of, like after that happens to an individual, like they get the worst job ever, right? You could be sent undesignated back to the fleet, whatever the case may be, needs of the Navy. And in her case, they worked with her and it worked out for her and her situation. And then also in Japan, we had a female in the shop that, even though she made it through all the other pipeline training and made it through the helicopter rag, she eventually got out to Japan to get her, the tactical seat qualifications in the aircraft, and didn't make it through. But one thing she loved doing was she always had a camera on her, and she always loved taking pictures. So, eventually she became an MC, and that was the best thing for her, because, her motivation was driven by something else, and it wasn't like the job that we had, and so it's sometimes it's just not for folks, and, maybe their motivation is drive somewhere else. And I think like one important thing to take away from that, is that that's okay. And,
Totally.
and you can excel and succeed in other, paths in your life, and, helping folks with a transition.
Yeah, for sure. That's well said. Well, so you graduated there, you went to HS-10, right?
I did.
Nice. And then from there, I don't know, just take us, through your Navy career, and then we'll get into some rescues.
Okay. Yeah, I just went through HS-10. That was my first a little bit of first fleet exposure because, sometimes when the aircraft are down, they'll ask to, go on a CQ det with a squadron or something like that. So like we went on a couple debts with HS6 at the time to get our qualifications knocked out, from helos not being up for maintenance or whatever it was at the time. So I got to do that. And I got to meet the first female rescue swimmer chief, Tish. I won't say her full name on here because I don't know if she cares to, have her name on social media or not. But
get her on.
Yeah, you just got to get her on. She was also like SWITI qualified. So a great gal, great mentor. She was dual military, household, all that, good stuff. So I look up to her a lot, and I wish I had known her sooner in my career than, rather than getting to know her later. But I met her for the first time, and we got all that stuff done. Did pipeline training through HS10. I actually did graduate with class honors, and I was a class honorman for HS10.
Wow.
And that's
awesome.
Yeah, it was. I wasn't expecting it, but I know that they saw. We had a couple other people struggling in the class with us, and I'm not going to say that I am not the best by any means. I just, really paid attention to everybody that was struggling in general and how we could all like work together to be successful and be like the best graduating class. And they saw that in us, and I guess they had asked them like, hey, who was, pulling so and so along, in the class and stuff. And they're like, oh, well, she was studying, it was Erica, she was studying with so and so, or whatever. And they're like, okay. And I think that's how like my name, got into the pot for that. But so that was, and then I really started seeing like the potential in myself, because before that, you really didn't have, like, growing up in my childhood, I didn't have anybody ever say, like, wow, you're amazing, you're doing so good, like, you're awesome at this, you're awesome at that, you're really talented in this area, really didn't have that exposure of any type of tough love, or I don't know how you explain it, but it was the first time that I like saw the potential in myself. I'm graduating from there. So, and then I took orders to Japan. So I went out to HS-14, and we deployed with the Kitty Hawk Battle Group, 7th Fleet. So called it the 911 Battle Group. You're always gone majority of the year, never home. It was really, being overseas, I loved it because it was a tight-knit family. And I think it made me a better crewman, being, in close proximity with everyone. And the only thing that you had to do was like, hang out with everybody that you worked with after work, and, talk about what happened and what didn't happen every day in the aircraft, in the water, whatever was going on. And then, and then we, OIF happened. So 9/11 happened, and we were still doing OIF, and, we deployed for our first shock and awe. And that was my first exposure to the wartime environment, being out on the Kitty Hawk in the Gulf.
Yeah. So you were on the Kitty Hawk, the aircraft carrier Kitty Hawk?
Yes. I was on the Kitty Hawk. Yep. And we were out there with, the Constellation and the Lincoln Battle Groups.
Yeah, I was on the Connie. I'd done a couple debts on the Kitty Hawk as well.
Wow.
Yep. Small world. So how was that whole shock and awe? That's,
when you're on the ship in the middle of the ocean, around all that, you never know what to expect. When you're on the boat, you really don't think anything of it, because you're such a power force out there together with all all the battle groups, and doing the mission. But it really hits when you're actually got the GAU manned. So we had like the GAU, the 50 cal, was it GAU 16? We have the GAU 21 now, but I think it was like GAU 16 at the time. And like you're logging this green ink, in your logbook, because it's like, wartime, you got your manned weapons, all that stuff. And it's really scary. We had, just this past year, an HSM squadron take out some Houthi boats. And, back then we had, what were they called? The little wooden boats, the dhows. Yeah, the dhows. So you had all these dhows just approaching these warships,
Mm-hmm.
and you're like, well, number one, you're pretty brave, doing that. But and then for you as a crewman, and star swimmer, it's scary because it's like your job is to protect the carrier, but your job is also to save lives.
I know.
And
Such a contrast.
right. And but obviously if somebody is a threat, like 100%, you're going to take them out and protect, what's yours.
Yeah.
So those were some scary moments when you're flying around playing guard and you have to go check out all these, different contacts that are called out and take
Were you
pictures.
doing like double SC? Like you'd have to hover close to it, take the pictures, bring it back, get it developed, all that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
The environment is so different now compared to what it was back then. And then you think about
Right.
how it was back then, you're like, wow, like we were literally just here we are. We're going to
I
take a
know.
picture of you.
I know what you're
And
saying though, because
yeah,
we would be directed out. They would say there's some boat, and it was like that was half our job back then in the 90s. And we'd hover and then we'd have like the M240 or even M60 on my first deployment.
mm,
And we're taking pictures, it has to go back, get developed, and by that time, who knows? But someone would just run across the deck, and it's like, do I lock and load? Like, what the heck? And they're like, okay, pilots are like, we'll cruise out of here now. And like, at any moment, you don't know, you just don't know. Like, you're gonna have to light these guys
right.
up, or you're gonna start taking fire, and then, we're just sitting there in the cabin door, crisscross applesauce, taking pictures, or our legs hanging out. So,
Yeah, it's yeah, so those were some moments, and then it really hit. So we had I remember being in the berthing one night, and BFA 195, Chippy, the Chippy squadron girls, the maintenance girls, we were all in one CAG female berthing together. Limited berthing on the ship, so all the females from the entire air wing were like in one.
yeah.
And I remember the Chippy girls were crying and they were saying like the pilot didn't come home or pilot didn't come home. And I'm just thinking to myself like, oh my gosh, and this is a single seater at the time. And unfortunately he was taken out by friendly fire on their way back after doing their bombing raids. So he was shot down by one of our own land-based Patriot missile batteries. And Lieutenant Nathan O.J. White was his name. And that was the first burial at sea that we had experienced, during the war. And then on top of it, they actually, time was going by and we're like, where's our pilot? We're not getting a response. And finally, the battle group commander was like, hey, we're going to send out our own 2 helicopters. So I was not qualified at the time and too junior of a sailor to go on that mission, but we did send 2 hotels from Aegis 14 into Iraq. And they eventually did find him and bring him home.
Mm-hmm.
So not to the ship, but like flew him out to Germany and all that stuff. But yeah, that was an experience, and like hearing those guys talk about their experiences being like overland and doing that part of it was awesome to hear, and also scary at the same time because you're like, oh wow, like here we are, like we're doing it. And it's a lot of what you don't hear today because people don't talk about it or they can't. But they did. And going through those situations like reminds me like every day in the Navy. It's a good, and I have to tell this to like junior swimmers, right? That are just itching for that rescue, itching to jump in the water. It's just like, hey, it's a good day in the Navy when everybody comes home safe and we did the mission and our job is done and we didn't lose anybody. We didn't lose, an aircraft. We didn't lose a person. It's a good day in the Navy. That's what we're here to do, right? And if anything catastrophic happens, then we act, and so sometimes I have to remind them of that. And I know they prefer to do like the HAD or DISCA because those are uncontrollable, hurricane disaster relief and things like that. I feel like they like being a part of something big like that instead of, saying like, hey, wow, we lost a whole aircraft today and maybe recover 2 out of the 3 crew, in that situation. But
yeah, no, it's traumatic. And it's tough. And then, I don't know how things are now, but I doubt that they're too far off, but it's, you never want to be labeled in that space because you only have so many air crewmen doing the job. And these things affect you can't unsee certain things. And,
Right.
Just to be able to talk about it and be okay with not being okay can actually make you, a stronger operator. But I don't know, I don't know where it's at. Maybe you can, has that changed or?
Uh, it it has changed quite a bit, but we still use joint forces for like a lot of things too. And I'll give you some scenarios. So rescues. So for anybody who's listening or the viewers, I'm sad to say that I have never had a live rescue. Knock on wood, because we're going back to sea duty and deployment is in the near future. But and I would probably be the hoist operator and give it to the junior guy or gal anyways. That's just the nature of our job and what we do, like to make it fun for them, but or to have that experience too. But I was on a lot of medevacs and recoveries. So we had a jet off the Kitty Hawk catch one of the catch wires that didn't have a motor on behind it. The wire split in half on the flight deck. It ripped through one of the tail rotors on our aircraft that was stashed in the island to where it wasn't flyable. And it literally just, and those drive shafts, like they're pretty strong, like metallic, but just ripped right through it like it was nothing. And, like a samurai chopping through a watermelon. It was just literally like just took it off. Well, it didn't completely like rip off, but we had to crane that helicopter off the ship. And unfortunately, there was also a sailor on the flight deck that had his leg amputated.
Yeah.
And so we were part of the medevac crew. So we're 100 miles off the coast of Japan, and it's at night. We have no lights inside of the aircraft because it's the hotel. So we had to pop open all these green chem lights and stick them all over the aircraft so that way we could see, and the doc could see and, push him morphine when he needed it. But it's just, and I was sitting there on the flight deck right before we're getting ready to take off, and he's already in the aircraft in a Stokes litter, like the worst litter to be in on a ride like that. But that's what they had him in at the time. We're just trying to get him, to the hospital. And one of the corpsmen comes out with a big old box, and it's like, sounds like there's fluid, inside of it. And I'm like, what's this? And he's like, that's the other half of his leg. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And so, put the box inside of the aircraft, and then like, we take them and we get them off to Yakuza Naval Hospital. But there was and then as far as like the joint forces one, we had an S3 near Kido Iwo Jima. So the Stennis battle group was with us in the same operating area. It was us, the Kitty Hawk and the Stennis. And an S3, they were no longer an ASW platform, but they were a tanking platform, and it was Blue Wolf 704, and they crashed into an island near Iwo Jima, and it was called Kita Iwo Jima. And I sent you the pictures
I'll
of that.
It on here.
Yeah, and you can see like the island itself is just completely vertical, and there's like a haze of clouds over it. Well, the rumor was that they thought it was a contact at night that they were going to go check out, and that's the reason why they went to low altitude. They didn't realize it was like just a random island near Iwo Jima, and so they ended up crashing into a saddle. And because it was a tanker, it was just full of fuel. So it was pretty much on fire for 3 days, and nobody could go near it. And then finally they asked us, HS-14, since we were the nearest ship with Hilo assets, to go do the recovery efforts for that one. And because we weren't qualified in rappel yet at that point, we have it now in our community, but we didn't back then. We had to use the Air Force PJs out of Okinawa. And they came out to Iwo Jima with us and was helping us with the recovery efforts. So we would take them out every day, hoist them down to the mountain. They would rappel down, get what they could, put it in body bags, hoist it back up to the aircraft. And Iwo Jima, because it's a sacred island, they're like, you're not bringing any of that here, and respectfully. So we had to go, I can't remember what ship it was at the time, but we had to go to one of the DDGs and take all the meat, so their entire supply of meat from their freezers, like off the ship, so that way we could put body bags on the ship. And every day that we had found, a person, identified somebody, we would bring them to the ship and put them on there, shut down the aircraft, do a brief with 7th Fleet, and then, you know, like head back to the island and stuff like that. So it was pretty wild experience. And it was great working with the PJs and getting to know, like, that's when I found out like what they really did and what kind of training they went through. Because, you know, when you're done doing the mission, you guys kind of like sit around and talk about what happened that day, how they, you know, maximized their skill sets doing the recovery efforts. You know, something that we never really carry on us ever is Vicks Vapor Rub, you know, but they carry it on them all the time because of the environments that they're exposed to, you know, recovering bodies and stuff like that. So now in my go bag, I always carry Vicks Vapor Rub on me just in case, because you never know. You know, it's just us. Those were like quite a bit of experiences, and what drove me to also want to become an EMT. And when I found out that the squadron was willing to send a couple of us to the EMT school at Yokosuka, then I got qualified as an EMT to like advance, you know, my skill sets and be able to help more.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I wonder, like, well, I guess now you're flying with medics, right? So you just kind of transfer that, because the rescue swimmer, you know, when I'm interviewing the folks like Bill Moss and some of these guys from, you know, the original days, and then how it transitioned, I was kind of like somewhere in the middle. But it's like we're expected to do so many things. It's so cool that, you know, you guys have the medics flying with you now, and, you know, because we'd take you know, advanced first aid. You know, I always say our job was to get them in the helicopter and keep them alive until we got to someone who had a clue what they were doing. PJs are legit. I mean, they're kind of everything. I don't know, if I had to do it again, it'd be a toss up, but I think a PJ would be a cool job to do. Not deploying on ships all the time. But yeah, like as you're going through, it's like these are, you know, recoveries. Like people think, you know, it's all glory because you see, you know, a movie and The Guardian or Top Gun or something where, you know, they jump out. I mean, there's a lot of it's search for one, not the rescue. In most cases, if there's an incident, it's not always, and majority is not always a positive outcome. So there's a lot of recovery, and, you know, it's traumatic. So even while you're doing these mission sets, like what's your mind like? Like you're so focused on just getting this through, because now there's new smells, like you're saying, you don't have the vapor rub and everything else. There's all these things that are triggering emotion, and I know in that time you're probably channeling everything, but I'd just be curious, like what's your mindset in those times?
It is, you know, you really don't think you do. You definitely utilize your training that you've done. You know, before I get in the aircraft, I think about so much stuff, especially now that I'm a mother today, too. Like, what could go wrong today and what's different today than any other day? And that's a lot of what we brief, you know, that we didn't used to brief back then. It's like, what's different today that's going to throw us off from the normal routine of what we do every day or what we train to. And that's where you really start thinking about those situations. But you know, when you actually do get a call, the adrenaline just rushes through you. And like I said, all you can do is rely on your training. And it's not until afterwards, and I was talking to you about this yesterday on the phone, is that's when you really start analyzing, you know, like the entire scenario or situation that you just went through. And you're like, okay, like, what did I do right? What did I do wrong? What can we do better? And in the SAR community as a whole, I think we become better at everything by, you know, expressing those experiences and sharing those experiences with everybody else, because then you learn so many things. And having the SAR med techs, the paramedics that we have on the aircraft with us, you learn more. And they're not just, and what I love about them is they really do, you know, their job is to train us to be better at our job. And, you know, and we're trying to go in the direction of, like, now every SAR swimmer is going to be an EMT.
Nice.
that's the direction that we're trying to go in the community. And it's most likely going to happen in the near future, which is good for all these guys and gals, coming up in the ranks in the pipeline and to have that experience. But
it's great for when they get out as well, because so many SAR swimmers get in to the first responder, like firefighters or EMTs. And
oh yeah. Yeah, and they're a flight nurse. So one of my good buddies is a flight nurse in Arizona. And he's just like still like he just loves it. Like he just loves that job. They the SAR paramedics, they'll like we have PQSs you can do and stuff on the ship. So even when I was an EMT, like the ship would let you do an IV PQS. So even though like my EMT cert technically didn't allow it at the time, like the ship, as long as you did this PQS to the ship, they're like, here you go, like you can give IVs now, which is great when you have the gastro pandemic breakout, especially in your shop. You're like, let's just go down to medical, I'll pop an IV in you really fast,
Yeah.
And it's awesome having them. So like I definitely take full advantage of that and emphasize it. So like when I was at HSC 28, I had 2 paramedics on our team, and every time we would go out on deck, I'm like, hey, bring all of your stuff, get whatever you can from medical and the supplies, because we're going to utilize it. Like I really want to train, our SAR swimmers how to use all of this equipment. And so, they did.
It's interesting because how it's cool for you guys, but for like the patient, you're sitting there and you got how to pop an IV for dummies book in one hand, and then you're going, wait, what's going on?
Yeah, no, we practiced on each other. So before you would go, before you would go poke anybody else, we practiced on each other. And I love that, because it builds like trust too, like amongst everybody who's doing it. Like you see each other doing it versus, just one of our SAR swimmers with paramedics, like doing it alone, somewhere else with like you said, holding the how-to book and then actually doing it to somebody. So I had our OPSO, he just loved his swimmers, and same thing. He really wanted us to advance that skill set and knowledge. And he would come down he said, as soon as you finish your IV PQS, I want to be the first one that you guys give an IV to. So we have a picture of him. I don't have it on me, but we had a picture of him with both arms out, and my buddy Matt and I, like I'm in one arm giving him an IV, and my buddy Matt is on the other arm giving him an
So
IV.
cool.
And it's just awesome, being able to do that, having that experience and exposure.
Did you guys do that for like after a hard night of partying to get over the hangover too?
I will neither confirm nor deny if the community does that, and if our corpsmen who work with us in the community do that. So
okay. Fair. Well, that's awesome. So being a SAR swimmer is, to me, the ultimate form of serving others. You are putting your life on the line to help someone you don't even know, someone that's potentially attacking you, and they're in shock, they're going through their own traumatic experience, and you're putting your life as a mother, just as a human, on the line to save that person no matter what. That is just the ultimate. Have you been able to continue this trait? You're obviously still in the military, but outside of the military.
Yeah. One thing that I've figured out about myself throughout the years, and I think a lot of us share this, after having gone through our experiences and served in the military, is, you always got to be a part of something that's bigger than yourself. And whether it's like with your church, or, it's in the community, helping others like in any way that you can. So a friend I was fortunate to run into a friend, Tyson Birdside. He is one of the presidents of the Hiraeth Foundation, and it's a foundation that reaches out to veterans and first responders. So we cover everybody, because we know that everybody goes through those traumatic experiences. And like when you leave the military, you leave a community, and you had a type job like this, that's why like frog teams are so close and the dive teams are so close. It's because we had that camaraderie, and we all had a common denominator between us all. And, when you leave the service, you lose that in yourself. And so the Hiraeth Foundation is a foundation dedicated to belonging for others. And so we reunite folks back together, whether it's doing like group projects together. We recognize them as Hero of the Month. We ship out coffee to ships, to sailors and deployed troops. There's, again, it's just being, a part of something that's bigger than yourself. And I've been fortunate to be with them for a little over a year now, and just found out that I'm going to be the vice president of the organization. Which is, I told him, I was like, hey, I gladly accept, but I'm just letting you know I'm going to be busy these next 2 years. But
yeah, no kidding.
Once I draft that retirement paperwork, I'm just going to go full force with it, and there's, and we also don't realize it, but like, there's a lot of people who struggle too with, things and handling things by themselves. And we don't ever want somebody to go through that. I had a master diver, Dan Jackson, that put me through the chief season in the reserves. And I never really knew what divers were until, I had met him. He kind of like, told me what they did and their experiences and stuff. And like, man, we talk about like John McCain, the Fitzgerald, things like that had happened. Those guys go through same thing, a lot of traumatic experiences. And unfortunately, he went through one in his personal life, and he had stage 4 colon cancer and had passed away from that. And the way that we all came together to take care of him, in the last stages of his life, whether it was bringing like, making things better for him, cancer treatment, food to help fight cancer, or like anything that was going to help benefit his body, mind, body, and soul. We were all there for him as a community, as the Chiefs Mess, and for me especially, because the reason why like we became really good friends is like during the Chiefs season, and I'm going off track a little bit with this, but it's important to me. During the Chiefs season, I was pregnant with my son Weston, and he knew that I was a star swimmer, and he knew that I did marathons and stuff because he got to know me as a person, not just a chief select going through the season. And I remember there would be times where there would be other like chiefs or female chiefs, and they'd be like, you need to stop running. You're not supposed to run like you're pregnant. And I was like, oh, but look at them crazy. Like, I just ran a half marathon, like in my first trimester. And they were just very uncomfortable with it. And I, now looking back at it, I get it, because like you're a liability, right? If something happens to you and baby going through that process. But he was a stickler. He was just like, you fully capable of running? And I'm like, yes, I am. And he's like, does your doctor know like that you're doing all these workouts and these runs? And I was like, yes, he does. And he was like, all right, get your butt back up to the front, lead the pack. And I'm like, all right. And so it was nice because he basically just shushed the noise and allowed me to continue, kicking butt and being a rock star, going through that process. And so that meant a lot to me. And then, same with dive community, they see the qualities and the drive and the motivation, like that they have in them, they see, in us as well. And as, as well as our brother frog teams. And so being a part of that, like, it doesn't matter what community you come from or what branch of service or anything like that. Like, eventually we're all a part of like the big picture together. And I want to be a part of that purpose and still taking care of the troops. And that way after the fact. And again, just like being a part of something that's bigger than myself. That's awesome. That's what gives me through life.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. And you're modeling to not only your kids, but just to everyone that knows you. You have such a great reputation. I heard about you through our small community, and like you got to talk to Erica, but just, yeah, you think about like just your life and what you're able to show your own family compared to what you were shown. You broke that cycle, and you're doing amazing things. So it's so cool.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
You want to pivot to a hypothetical scenario?
Sure. Let's do it.
Okay. So your scenario, this is just let's understand the mindset of Erica Gibson. When you get the call, let's see, what's a good one for you? A submerged vehicle recovery.
Oof.
Okay, you're on the Alert 30 helo. Now launch the Alert 30 helo. You have a little bit of information. This is all you have, but you always have misinformation. So in your mind, you're trying to figure out what you and your team are going to do to recover a submerged vehicle. So here's the scenario. A military vehicle falls off a bridge into a deep river during a convoy. Crew members are trapped inside and strong currents hinder rescue efforts.
Wow, that's yep. All right. And you said we're the Alert 30, right?
Oh, whatever. You're just
Yeah. Okay.
you're in the
Yeah.
air and you got diverted. Okay.
Okay. Yeah, we're in the air and we got diverted. Awesome. So first thing I'm going to do is like find out where they are and mark on top, right? And possibly like you said, strong currents
I did.
and deep waters. So man, I really marking the position and honestly being like, where's the closest like dive team, right? Like, because we need folks underwater with oxygen to find them and to get them out, and then having the resources that we need inside of the helicopter. Like that's what I'm thinking. So if we're already airborne and we don't have that stuff, like I'm going back to get it because, those individuals are going to need some advanced care coming out of that situation, and just making sure that we have the resources available for them to get it. It's one of those things where you say that you want to jump in the water and like try to go get them yourselves and things like that. But at the end of the day, like you're doing a disservice and injustice to yourself, to your crew, because realistic in today's scenario, and that it's funny, that scenario, it's not funny. It's funny though, because my family always calls me a rescue diver. And I have to say,
same.
hey, like, I'm not a rescue diver. I'm a rescue swimmer. There's a difference here, right? And so, given that scenario, I know exactly what our tasking would be, and that would be to find the location of it, to mark it, to stay on station, to see if you find anybody, be there in case somebody surfaces right away, right? Be ready to deploy. In that scenario, but also like making sure that we have our assets and giving them what they need to do their job, to make the recovery quick, like to get them out of the water as quickly as possible.
Yeah, no, good job. I would agree. That's that's kind of an impossible, because even a crewman grab a HEEDS and go down if you had to, but we're not supposed to re-enter or enter a submerged aircraft or vehicle.
Yeah.
If there's no other, I mean, you are the SAR asset at that point, right? So you're the coordinator. I mean, you could even put a swimmer in to get a better understanding of the situation underwater. But if it's deep and it's swift, I mean, these I ask everyone like these kind of possible but kind of difficult. ChatGPT spits them out, and just to see what's the mindset of the rescue swimmer.
Yeah, it's what it's like. You'll have to in the future, if you get like a junior, like fresh person who hasn't like heard or seen this podcast and ask them that question, I'm sure that response is gonna be like, I'm gonna jump in the water and I'm gonna go find them and I'm gonna like try to get them out. And knowing what I know now as like a senior crewman and doing this for almost 24 years, it's like the reality of the situation is, like at that point, like the asset that you are and what you're capable of doing and not capable of doing, like you really have to look at it like big picture, to,
Well, that's why we have senior crewmen, and, as far as the crew chief and everything, sometimes you have, the same amount of time in the aircraft just based on the assets you have. But it's the mindset. It's not even about necessarily the outcome. It's where your mind went, because you are assessing, you are trying to just get information. You're figuring this out so that you can affect the rescue more efficiently and effectively. In my own mind, I'm thinking, well, how deep is it really? How swift is it really? And there's just you don't know any of this stuff at this point. So a lot of times until you get on scene, it's in your head. It's funny because you ever talk to someone on the phone for like years or something, and then you have this image of what they look like. And then when you finally meet them for the first time, you're like, oh my gosh, this is totally, totally different. I had no clue.
Yeah.
This just happened to my wife the other day. So we were talking about it, but it's kind of the same thing. It's like you're mapping this thing out, you're creating this image in your mind of like all these different scenarios, and you have other people in the aircraft. So you're sharing this data and having their own experiences and perspectives put in. But, once you're finally on scene, then it just, everything starts fitting into place. And if you don't do that pre-work en route, you're going to be struggling to map it all together. It's almost like that is the foundation, and then you fine tune it once you're there, and you can just affect the situation, the rescue, so much more effectively.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was, when we used to have our crew chief boards, and they still do it to these days, like given scenarios like, hey, like your swimmer jumps, in to do a rescue and he's face down in the water, what do you do? Or like you're over land and you're doing GRE and you got shot in the leg, but you got another crewman down, you need to bring them back to the aircraft, but you can't carry them, you can't fire them and carry them or drag them because like you're shot in the leg too. And it's like, what do you do? That one I actually thought of a smart one. I'm like, how far away are they from the helicopter? And they're like 100 feet. I'm like, all right, I'm gonna pay out the rescue hoist cable, I'm gonna hook it to their vest, and I'm gonna drag them back to the helicopter. Like that's how I'm getting back.
Yeah, smart.
Real world scenario, would that work under like a hot environment? No, it wouldn't, right? Like you're just like
Yeah. Pretty time consuming, just an open target. Now you're tethered.
Right, yeah, now you're a sitting duck. But those are, situations that you always think of and stuff. And like even in like our civil services, you have like the swift water rescue.
Mm-hmm.
And even with them, they only have certain individuals that are on the surface, and they've got their dive team, to help in the recovery process and stuff. And so it's kind of like we have to think that, it's like we're separate in the military and in our communities, even like in the Navy, we're still separate. But at the end of the day, like you're all one asset for one mission to get the job done. And it's like understanding how each one works and what they're capable of and bringing them together in every situation and scenario,
Yep.
So
yeah, that's awesome. Well, Erica, you've had incredible experiences that not many can relate to or really understand. With your 24 years of experience in the military, and even coming from your childhood, what's a bit of wisdom you would want to leave our listeners with?
keep an open mind, never assume. You can never predict. Every situation is going to be different. I think something that we ask ourselves today, what's different today, works in every situation, whether it's at home, it's at work, in your retired life, your parenting life, your marriage, anything like, but specifically when you're going out there and you're doing the mission, or any job for that matter in the military, it's like asking yourself, like, what's different today? And then also after every situation that you're exposed to, asking yourself, what could have I done better? What could the team done better? How can we improve this process? Those are things that you don't think of, when you're like a junior crewman and you're coming up through the pipeline. And then just having that much exposure now, I've learned so much throughout the years that I apply it, in everyday life, asking myself those questions, and you really start to look back more. And I think it comes with like age and maturity too, because, like people do it at the end of the New Year's, New Year's Eve. They're like, what was my year like? How could I make this next year better? What's my new resolutions? But it's something that, that would be those are my words of wisdom is, what's different? What can I do better? How can we make things better?
Yeah, that's great advice, great wisdom. And it's coming from such a credible source. Well, and I'm going to use that, what is different? It's so simple. I feel like we can overcomplicate things with, overthinking the moment, and it's just what's different. Maybe nothing is. Great.
Yeah.
move on. But usually things happen each day and they affect us, and we may not really realize them until we call them out. So I think that's that's great advice. Thank you for that. And thank you for being on the show today. The Navy, the US, the world is so fortunate to have you, a person like yourself, in the role that you're in, making a difference. It may not seem like it, as you're doing your daily thing, but I mean, you really are, you truly are. You're making a huge difference, and you've broken the cycle. You're modeling such amazing behavior, and thank you so much for being on. And thanks to all our listeners, and we will see you next time.
Thank you for listening to the Calm in the Chaos podcast. Please subscribe to be notified of future episodes, and if you enjoyed what you just heard, please leave a 5-star review on whatever platform you listen to podcasts. Until next time, get out there and make a difference so others may live.